Is it just the time of year, or does it really feel like something is coming? On this Hallows Eve, we're thinking about those drivers left out in the cold, longing for a treat but ultimately feeling tricked, as something terrible this way comes for those drivers and teams that have failed to meet their mark set for them at the start of the year. And for some of them even, their failures may well prove fatal to their ongoing existence within the fastest sport in the world. One team in a constant state of change may well be playing their headsman, as they give their lacking driver the chop, perhaps making way for a damsel in distress just waiting for their saviour. Want to know whose recent failures have left them on the chopping block? There's more than one, so while you may think the answer is obvious, some of them may catch you off guard. And stick around, because we could be due for a late-stage silly season the likes of which not seen since 2016, with some mind-bending driver moves seeming more and more likely to happen with each passing race week. Let's start at an obvious place, as the Dia de los Muertos atmosphere around the Mexican Grand Prix may have seen the home hero being rendered a calacas. Sergio Perez has had a pretty dismal season, no matter how you try to square it. His one saving grace is that P2 spot in the Drivers' Championship he currently sits, but that is now under more threat than ever after Perez gifted Hamilton a real opportunity to steal the spot for himself. Lewis had spent the majority of the last two races in the garage in the steward's office, having faced a retirement and disqualification in successive races, giving Perez ample opportunity to capitalize on the Brit's shortcomings. It's rare for Hamilton to miss out on points in consecutive races, never mind having two results rendered null and void due to a self-professed at-fault collision and a poor car setup. But this was the opportunity that Perez was presented with. Gaining 5 and 10 positions respectively in those races sounds good at first, but then you realize it followed characteristically shocking qualifying performances, meaning that he had to claw his way back to the points, in the case of Qatar just 1 point, in one of the most dominant cars of all time. So after failing to truly capitalize on Hamilton being MIA for 2 races, Perez was at least still 39 points ahead. With 4 rounds left, all he had to do was ensure that Hamilton scored less than 10 more points than him in each of the following races, drive safe and utilize the car to the best of his abilities. Not even the best that the car can offer, just do your best, Sergio, and let the car handle the rest kind of thing. So the obvious thing to do was make like the Unabomber and send it, going 3 wide into the first corner to create a Charles Leclerc sandwich, getting as much airtime as a 747 and going out with a whimper in front of your own home crowd as your team desperately tries to give your car the facelift it needed to get back on track. All the while, Hamilton in a revitalized Mercedes seemingly hitting their stride at the back end of the season, secures 19 points and puts himself just 20 away from Perez, and more importantly that precious P2 spot. To call this a disaster is underselling it. This was supposed to be the feel-good weekend Perez needed to get back on track and maybe even get some momentum at the back end of the season to carry into the next. Instead, it seems like all of that potential energy was snatched up by one of the men vying for his seat, Daniel Ricciardo, who not only out-qualified Perez in his second race back in a weaker car, but outshone him and, dare we say it, outclassed him in every way possible this weekend. Now, Perez did get a monster start, cruising his way into top 3 contention after getting the jump on the Honey Badger and the smooth operator Carlos Sainz, something which Martin Brundle picked up on in his post-race article for Sky F1, with the ex-McLaren man pondering on Perez's poor weekend, having this to say. On Sky Sports F1, we debated whether the hugely vocal and animated support for Sergio was an added pressure to the relatively poor form he's found himself in since the Monaco Grand Prix, or if it was just the motivation that he needed while surfing the adoration. Perez did everything right until the turning into turn 1. From 5th on the grid, he made a great start, picked up the slipstream of the 3 now ahead of him, spotted the gap perfectly on the left-hand side, which was also the cleaner, wider racing line into the first corner. Brundle would then go on to analyze what Perez's fatal mistake was, saying that Sergio's biggest mistake was that he turned into the corner too hard and too early. He needed to run a wider line around the outside and seize the high ground for the second part of the chicane. going on to say that Perez hadn't only let himself down, but the fans and even the race promoter. While yes, the pressure of a nation on one's shoulders may well cause mistakes to be made, Perez's actions were incredibly short-sighted and rash, as surely he must understand the long-term impact of getting it all wrong as he inevitably did. It's clear that Perez had premeditated an epic win at his home Grand Prix, willing to send it from anywhere and everywhere to secure his victory, having only been on the podium for the last 2 years. Something that, mind you, most drivers who enter the sport will never get to experience, which, if we are honest, this kind of hero fantasy is something that we would expect a petulant rookie with an ego problem to be saying, not a veteran of the sport of 13 years. Petulance and disaster seem to be an ongoing miasma that just hangs around some areas of the paddock, with Yuki Tsunoda seemingly blowing any claim that he would have for the Red Bull second seat with a self-destruct incident by turning into the comparatively cool Oscar Piastri. It really does seem like opposites attract after all, just not in the way that either driver would have wanted. And the driver that may well partner Tsunoda or potentially even replace him in the pecking order for the Red Bull second seat, if the rumor mill is to be believed, is all too familiar with disaster at the back end of the season. We'll give you a hint: his name rhymes with Fernando Alfonso, and he has been continuously let down by a team whose very existence is under threat due to the entire father-son play project falling apart at the seams. Like a child who saw his dad putting presents downstairs and eating the cookies, Lance is just not playing along anymore, bringing the continued presence of his father into question. This matched with the frankly biblical decline of Aston Martin, both on and off the F1 track, leaves a two-time champion turned damsel in distress. Unfortunately for him, there is one team left on the grid that he is yet to piss off or burn his bridges at. Now, it may sound insane, and don't you worry, we can feel the tinfoil rubbing against our scalps, but please just hear us out here. Alonso has been continuously let down by the team that he has single-handedly gifted podiums. Without Alonso, God only knows where the Silverstone-based team would be, and all of his work is now crumbling down as Aston Martin plummet down the constructors like a stone off a cliff. And it seems like there's no stopping this decline, potentially proving fatal to future investment when partnered with the daycare situation on the other side of the garage. Meanwhile, all of the teams blitzing past Aston Martin are rapidly closing in on Red Bull, who, while they may just be putting all of their focus on dominating next year already, they must also be putting some serious thought into the all-important money machine that is the Constructors' Championship next year. Funding moving into the 2026 regulations is going to be pivotal, as this will be Red Bull's first time creating an engine from scratch themselves, so being able to fight without one hand tied behind your back, or rather one hand hanging limply to one side while the other one is built like Terry Crews, will be pivotal to their continued existence in the new regulations. Tsunoda has proved himself unworthy. Ricciardo has had a good weekend, but is yet to show consistency in squeezing every last drop out of the machinery provided, and is still very much viewed as damaged goods. Lawson isn't quite ready, and so the options are really thin. So why not take a gamble on someone who is notorious for dragging cars kicking and screaming up the championships? A mature soul who will provide great insight and fight with a furiosity and cunningness perfectly matched to Red Bull's style. In every way but age, Fernando Alonso is the perfect driver for Red Bull, and even this has been shown to not have any sort of impact on his quality or consistency. It's been hinted at by Helmut Marko, who may still yet see his Red Bull future swiftly ended, and while it may seem like a far-fetched scenario, who the hell would have seen the Piastri saga coming? Who saw Rosberg's retirement? Who among you watching right now in all seriousness saw Vettel's debut win at Toro Rosso, Ocon's debut victory at the Hungaroring, or Gasly's heroics at Interlagos and Monza? Maybe it's about time we embrace the chaos and welcome the prospect of a Fernando Alonso and Red Bull partnership into our hearts, as let's face it, crazier things have happened.